now that we have this this new application WTTR running as root, right, with root permissions, even if you don't run it as root because we're using that setuid bit, I want to show you how we could use an exploit, a simple exploit based on some of the imperfections in this program that we wrote. The scenario here is somebody has an application that needs to run as root privileges, but they missed a few things that, you know, should probably make it a little bit more secure. So somebody discovered this exploit. Let's walk through discovering that exploit. So first step is, if I'm going to play around with this application, I might notice that when I run it, it writes to a file that has root privileges. So I know this is running with setuid. And maybe if I look in the documentation, I might learn that I can pass a parameter for the URL. I'm not stuck with the one that the administrator put in the config file under etc. Now, as a normal user, I can't edit the configuration file, but I can run the command with a switch that overrides that file, right? So now I'm going to override it by putting my own website in. So for example, I'll put, well, we'll use HTTPS www.google.com, right? And if I run this, so you can see here it went out to google.com with that URL. It probably failed, right? Failed to fetch the weather because unsupported protocol, right? So let's see if, you know what? I forgot the P on HTTPS. There we go. So now it fetched the weather, but really it went to google.com, but let's see what it actually put in there. So if we go to cat var wttr weather.txt, so you can see here it's Google is confused. It says, I don't know what you're looking for. Why is Google confused? Well, if you look at the logs here, when it says it's fetching the weather data, notice it concatenated some stuff on the end. KPHL, which we know is the location, and then some parameters for the format. Well, what if there is a way to override that as well? So I can set the param to nothing, and maybe I can set the location to nothing. Now it should run it without, actually, I think it's params, not param. And again, this is something I would get from the documentation, right? There'd be like a man page that would tell me, here's the options you can use for this command. So I realized, oh, I can just strip off all that extra stuff so I can use whatever URL I want, and it still wrote my file, right? There it is. So it wrote google.com into that file. So it worked. And more importantly, I can also set the output directory, right? So let's say I make the output /root/test. I should not be able to do this, right? If I, oh wait, I'm in the wrong command here. So let me do this. So output, so /root/test. I should not be able to write a file into root test because I'm running this as student. Student doesn't have permission to root's files, right? Because that's a protected privileged account. I shouldn't even be able to list directories in that account, let alone write a file to it. But when I run this, it probably wrote the file, right? And if I use the sudo command to check, now of course if I'm an attacker I can't do this, I'd have to be testing this on my own machine. But if I run the sudo command and try to cat the contents of root/test, you can see there it is, right? It actually wrote that output. So now I know that I can pass with this little command, because it uses the setuid, I can override the output and have it write whatever I want. As long as it's getting it from a web page, it'll write whatever I want into root test. So the next step is I want to get some malicious payload to do something into root's folder. What can I do? What kind of interesting things might I be able to do? Well, let me show you something. So if you use the su command to log in as root, so on my system, when I logged in as root, notice that as soon as I logged in, it gives me some information here. It tells me my fully qualified domain name. It tells me what the current memory usage is in the file system, how much storage space. I got some colors and stuff in my command prompt. Well, what controls all that? So I'll show you. So if I look at the contents of root, oh, I need an A on here because I want to show hidden files. notice that there's a .bashrc file in here. So what is .bashrc? Bashrc is basically a script that will always run automatically whenever a user logs in. So if in your home directory you have a bashrc file, when you log in, Linux will, the kernel will automatically execute on the login as part of the login process whatever's in bashrc, amongst the other things that you see here. So if I look at the contents of that, so I'm going to look at root /.bashrc. So there's my bashrc script, right? It does a whole bunch of stuff. So this all gets executed when I first log in to the system. Now, what if I change the password in here, right? So if my goal as the attacker is to get access to the machine as root, I need to somehow change root's password. Well, one way I could do that is by injecting some code into this bashrc that just sets the root password the first time they log in. Because when they log in, it's going to execute bashrc using root's privileges, and then it'll change their password, and I'm good to go. So let me go back. So now I'm back as a regular user. So here's what I did. Well, actually, I'll show you this real quick. So there is a command. So here's the thing. If you run the passwd command to change a password, you could do this. You could make a shell script that just changes the password using the passwd command. So when root logs in, it's going to try to change it with passwd. The problem with passwd is that it's interactive. So root would they would see a prompt saying change your password, and they would have to type something in. Not going to work for me. I want to silently change their password, so unless they're paying close attention, they're not going to know that it's been changed. So there's another command that can do that. If you use the man command, you can take a look at the change password command. This is a command for changing passwords in batch mode. All you have to do is pass this command a list of usernames and passwords that you want to change the password for, and it'll just go and do it. It does require root privileges for this to run. So, for example, I can use change password. Oh, it says not found because I'm not root, so I have to give it the full path, which is usrs bin. Now, notice nothing happened here because it's waiting for standard input. So this is where I'd put in the username and the new password that I want to use. Now it's going to try to change it, and of course it's going to fail because I'm not logged in as root. So how do I do this silently? Well, instead of just running the command, I can instead echo as standard out into that command root password. Well, I'll put new password so it's clear what I'm doing here. I'm setting a new password. So now it'll echo root password directly into the change password command and then exit. And there you go. So now if I had root privileges, this would have run and changed the password. So all I want to do is get this line into bashrc so that it runs automatically when the user logs in. How am I going to do that? So what I've done here is I've created on a different server. So I'm the attacker. I created a fake web server. And in that fake web server, I have an index.html, and it contains just the basic code where it's going to change the root password, and then it's going to write some indication, some kind of alert somewhere so that I as the attacker know that password's been changed as quickly as possible so I can go and do my exploit into some folder somewhere. So now coming back over here, if I use the wttr command, and I'll test it first, right? For the output, I'm just going to use test because then it'll write it into my home directory. And then for the address, we're going to use http:// and I need the address for my fake web server, which I need to get from Google. So let me bring up my Alright, so here's the IP address for my fake web server. I'm going to come back over here and paste it in. So now it's going to go to my fake web server, and I do have it running on port 8080. And how did I run this fake web server? Coming back over here. So I'm just going to use Python to run it, right? So I'm just going to launch it with Python on port 8080. So now I've got this little web server running. I should be able to execute this command, and you can see it does the call to my fake website. It doesn't put any weird stuff on the end because I told it not to do that, and it should have written out the test. So let's take a look and see what's in test. There it is. That's my malicious script. So I know this is going to work. All I have to do, instead of outputting the test, I want to output to root.bashrc. If I run this, assuming I did this right, the first time I log in as root, so now I just logged in as root, and well, it gave me an error message there. So let's fix this. There is one step that I forgot. If you recall from my script, we'll come back over here. In this little script, I have it writing out a little alert that it created this, but it's got to go into student share. So I have to create that student share folder. So I'm going to do that real quick here. And now I should see that share folder. Everyone has full permission to it. So now if I log in as root again, su, and actually my exploit already worked, right? Even though it gave me an error message before, it actually did work. I have to use new password now to log in. Oops, sorry. It's NEWPASSWRD, and I'm in, right? So it actually changed my password. I promise you that new password was not the original password I had for root. So it actually changed it. And now, again, I'm sorry I didn't do this ahead of time, but now if I look in that share directory, there's that hack.txt, right? And just show you the contents of it, right? Malicious script executed, so it worked. So basically what I've done is I've been able to hijack the root account as a regular user. So not once did I have to use the sudo command to do any of this. I mean, I did to show you a couple things, but I could have carried out this entire attack without ever having to have root privileges. But ultimately, I was able to get access as root. Now, is this a perfect attack? Not really, because the root user, the first time they log in, they probably, hopefully, would notice that their prompt looks a little different and they're missing that stuff, and they might start to investigate that and discover that, hey, somebody changed my bash RC. I don't know, it may take them a little while to figure that out. They might be in a hurry and not even notice, right? Hey, I'm in a hurry. I just got to check something on this server. A lot of administrators manage lots of servers. They may never notice, right? So basically, I want you to take me some screenshots that show me some evidence that this worked, and we were able to use, we were able to exploit the system using SUID.